I still miss my husband after 30 years of him being gone. I met the love of my life in 1987 when I was just 15. Some might think it's a crazy story, but it's true. He was 18, and I always visited this convenience store after school. Being only 4'10", I often needed help reaching things on the top shelf. One day I asked this guy to get something for me. He barely spoke any English, and I had to point to what I wanted. But I thought he was quite cute. He was skinny and good-looking, and I developed a crush on him. We started hanging out by his old car, just talking. He was Mexican, had dropped out of school, and struggled with addiction. Despite that, he was incredibly smart with numbers and fixing things. I often wondered how we communicated, but somehow we made it work. Our lives took a turn when I got pregnant. I was a naive teenager, not thinking about the future. I begged him to take me away, and after a lot of tears, he agreed. He wanted me to have the baby, finish school, and marry someone good. But he couldn't bear to see me cry. Back then, we got a court date and married right after arriving in San Francisco. He found a job, and we rented an old house. It wasn't small, but it was definitely worn. He was always there for me during the pregnancy. I was self-conscious and cried often, especially when the house creaked at night. He would check the attic and always rubbed my back and feet before bed. He never let me carry anything heavy and never got annoyed when I yelled for help reaching things. We were best friends, relying on each other. But when our baby was just a year old, he left due to immigration issues. That baby, Matthew, became the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when my husband was gone, Matthew always made me smile. Being a young mother had its perks. I felt like I could play more. Tony came back when Matthew was 5 and had quit all the drugs. Those were the best years of our lives, despite the tough moments of withdrawal. I had to help him dress because his hands shook, and I cried seeing him so skinny. Matthew and Tony got along wonderfully, and we even tried for another baby, but things didn't work out. Sadly, Tony relapsed secretly and left out of guilt. I think he felt suicidal at that time. If I had known, I would have done everything to keep him here. But he left anyway. It was just me and Matthew, who was only 7 then. A year later, the police came to tell us Tony had overdosed in Florida. I spent all my savings to bring his ashes back to San Francisco. He was just 26. I cried a lot when I received the ashes, and they still sit in my cupboard. I've never dated anyone else. I still miss him, and I'm just here alone. But my son lives down the street, and I get to babysit my grandkids, so I guess my life is okay. Honestly, I cried while writing this too. It's a crazy story, and some might not believe it, but I hope it entertains you at least. A 71-year-old woman approached me asking for help moving a shelf for $10. It became more than I bargained for. I'm 29 years old and currently living in a homeless shelter. For months, I've had no income, and about a month ago, my wallet was stolen, taking every form of identification I had. After Thanksgiving, I went to a church that offers a soup kitchen, hoping to get a photo ID to help me obtain a state ID for work. They only provide that service on Mondays, but I enjoyed some Thanksgiving leftovers while I was there. On my way out, I met a woman who offered me a bag of food. She was 71, living alone, and shared that she had no family around. She mentioned a boy she loved who was in prison, and then asked if I could help her move a shelf for $10. I was strong and used to helping people back home, so I agreed. As we walked to her apartment, she told me about helping homeless men in the past and how she would treat me like family. She showed me pictures of people from her church and talked about her long hair and experiences in Hollywood. Then she'd ask me to walk on the inside of the sidewalk and mentioned her identity. She said, "As long as you treat me as a woman, we'll be all right." I was a bit taken aback, but it didn't change how I felt about helping her. As we continued talking, she shared stories about her past and how some young men in her neighborhood would bother her. I pieced together that she had a unique perspective on her identity, but I didn't judge her for it. When we arrived at her apartment, she bought me some cigarettes and kept steering the conversation toward other men she had helped, lamenting how some had stolen from her. After moving the shelf, I asked to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, the door wouldn't shut properly, and while I was in there, she opened the door to talk to me. I felt uncomfortable and expressed that I wanted some privacy. She got upset and stormed off, saying I didn't need to be there if I felt that way. Once I finished, she showed me her bedroom and suggested I come back after my shelter's bed check to hang out. She mentioned having weed but didn't smoke herself. I thought it was just her way of helping me out, similar to how I had platonic friendships back home. But then things escalated. She asked for a hug, got touchy, and even kissed me on the head. When she asked to spray cologne on me, I felt increasingly uncomfortable. I usually let advances slide, hoping my disinterest would be enough to send a message, and eventually, she seemed to get the hint. We took the train uptown to shop, where she bought me some clothes. But even on the way back, her conversation and actions were pushing my boundaries. She mentioned getting a text from one of her other friends, and by that point, I was relieved to be heading back. The worst part of the day came when I went to the liquor store to spend the $10 she had given me, only to realize it had fallen out of my pocket. I dragged myself back to the shelter, feeling defeated, and went straight to sleep. Now, the morning after, I can't shake the strange experience. It's been weighing on me, and it feels so wild and unusual that I have no one to talk to about it. So here I am, sharing my story. Someone broke into my house and tried to find me. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs, offering a perfect balance of space and friendly neighbors. The area had no streetlights, so it was incredibly dark at night, especially when clouds blocked the moonlight. But I found that darkness made my little house feel even cozier. One winter evening, I returned home from work. It was cloudy, and my headlights illuminated only a small patch of the driveway. As I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. It was strange. I had never noticed that smell around my house before. Not seeing anyone nearby, I shrugged it off and went inside. After a long shift, I felt exhausted. Even though it was only 7 p.m., I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up later, convinced I had heard a noise inside my house. At first, I wasn't concerned. My friend sometimes stopped by to use my shower after work, and I had given him a spare key. He always texted me beforehand, though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The bright light from the screen blinded me. It was one of those old phones that didn't dim in the dark, and I squinted to see the time. It was after 9, but I couldn't tell if I had any unread messages. I called out my friend's name, but silence followed. Suddenly, I heard loud footsteps racing through the bottom floor of my house. My heart raced as I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. By the time I opened the door, the intruder was already up the stairs. My house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom at the end of the hallway. The doors were closed, but the bathroom door was slightly ajar. I heard the intruder thunder down the hallway and into the bathroom. Thank goodness for that. It gave me just enough time to open the attic access in my closet and hoist myself up. As I lifted myself into the attic, the intruder rushed out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps stop in my room, then rush back into the hallway and into the other bedroom, which was filled with boxes and my painting table. They seemed to think I would be hiding in the bedroom. Then it charged back into my room and turned on the light. Moments later, the closet door was yanked open. I crouched in the attic, just a foot away from the access, ready to stop them if they tried to climb up. From my vantage point, I could only see their legs. They wore dirty blue jeans and worn work boots. After a few seconds of searching, they stepped away, and I heard a loud crash, followed by a scream of frustration. That scream sent chills down my spine. It reminded me too much of my stepfather, who would lose his temper in a similar way. He had been hospitalized for severe mental health issues, which made his outbursts even more unsettling. The intruder ran back down the stairs, and I heard chaos erupt as they threw things around and knocked over furniture. I stayed crouched in the attic, realizing I had left my phone behind. I wasn't sure I could climb down without being heard. After what felt like an eternity, the noises finally stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe to climb down and call the police. As I exited the closet, I saw that the intruder had flipped my bed over, likely in an attempt to find me. I couldn't find my phone, so I hurried to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a disaster. Chairs were knocked over, the sofa flipped, and all my belongings were strewn about. The kitchen cupboards had been opened, and food was scattered across the floor. Thankfully, the only thing missing was a single knife from the wooden block. The police searched the house thoroughly. They discovered that the side door had been forced open and found cigarette butts along my fence line. They suspected the intruder had been watching my house for a while. I realized he must have been outside smoking when I got home. They collected evidence and advised me to stay with family or friends that night and to fix the door as soon as possible. I chose to stay awake instead. I moved a shelf to block the broken door and spent the next few hours cleaning up. I often went to the window with a flashlight, shining it along the fence line, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I arranged to have the door fixed and installed motion lights around the house. I even ran a phone line into the attic, ensuring I would never be trapped up there without a way to call for help again. Thankfully, nothing else happened during my 3 years living there. One more precaution I took was to practice getting out of bed and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I continued this even after moving, but now I use a crawl space at the back of the closet. I try not to dwell on what might have happened if I had been slower or if the intruder hadn't gone into the bathroom first. About 5 years ago, my company brought in someone to evaluate whether my position was still necessary. Thankfully, I passed with flying colors. I was hired as a helper, but my workload was overwhelming. Most of my coworkers struggled with technology, which meant I became an invaluable resource. For instance, one colleague spent half his day copying items into another program without even using shortcuts. He was so proud to show me his method, thinking he was saving time. I quietly created a program to automate that task and ran it whenever I could. I estimated I saved about 15 hours of work every day on top of my regular hours. But then came the individual I like to call Sergeant Trouble. He appeared one day, taking notes during our team meetings. When I made a light-hearted joke about a customer, he scoffed at me. I couldn't understand why he was so dismissive. That week was particularly tough. I was searching for important files while dealing with a chaotic atmosphere. One day, while digging through our file structure, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Sergeant Trouble's Notes. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. To my shock, I found a section dedicated to me, filled with derogatory comments, including a mocking remark about my mistaken joke. Feeling undervalued and overwhelmed, I decided to take action. I set up 3 emails, one to my boss, notifying him of my 2-week vacation, another to the company explaining my absence, and an auto-response directing urgent matters to Sergeant Trouble. Then, I turned off all my automated tasks. I casually stopped by his office to say, "I think I found a way to make your job easier." He barely acknowledged me, but I felt a sense of satisfaction. On Monday, I received multiple calls that I ignored. By Wednesday, anxiety crept in, but I reminded myself that my absence was causing chaos. I knew my automated tasks were crucial, and others would struggle to keep up. That Thursday night, I got a long email from my boss. He acknowledged my value to the company and expressed concern over my absence. He informed me that Sergeant Trouble would be leaving and offered me a raise of $10,000. When I returned the following Monday, I felt a mix of relief and triumph. My boss apologized, explaining he had no say in the situation before. While it was strange he could act after my departure, I was grateful for the outcome. In the end, I not only secured a raise, but also removed Sergeant Trouble from my daily life. It was a victory I would always remember. My wife slapped me in my 20s and I brushed it off. I shouldn't have. I've been reflecting on something from long ago, and I need to share it. About 16 or 17 years ago, when we were in our 20s with 2 young kids at home, my wife slapped me during an argument. It was the only time it ever happened. It didn't physically hurt, but the shock hit me hard. At the time, I brushed it off. I grew up watching movies where a woman slapping a man was treated as a dramatic moment everyone just overlooked. So I did too. We were young and stressed, and I chalked it up to postpartum issues. I never thought to question it. Over the years, every time I tried to bring it up, she would cry deeply. I ended up comforting her, feeling responsible for her emotions, about something that happened to me. I kept telling myself she was going through various phases: postpartum, overstimulation, premenopause, and eventually menopause. Each stage came with a new explanation, convincing me I needed to be more patient and understanding. What I never did was give myself any empathy. Looking back, I realized my frustration built quietly. I struggled to know when I was allowed to be upset or express my feelings. If I voiced anything, it would get linked to whatever she was experiencing. I felt I had to calm her down or avoid pushing her too far, especially around the kids. So I stayed silent, absorbing it all. I hate that this changed how I view things. It made me numb toward people dealing with depression or anxiety. I know those struggles are real and serious, but for years, they were reasons I was expected to suppress my feelings, and it slowly shut something off inside me. I never issued ultimatums. Everything I read said they were bad for relationships. I was scared to say, I can't do this anymore, fearing she might spiral. The kids were too young to handle that, so I kept the peace. I cooked every meal for 17 years and managed the house and most bills. She contributed, but it felt like a small fraction compared to my effort. I always told myself that was fine. That's what love and partnership are about. In a strange way, I believe she appreciates me. She knows I've put up with a lot and helped her through tough times. But appreciation isn't the same as truly fitting together in the long run. Now that the kids are older, I finally see our dynamic for what it is. I don't want to live the rest of my life this way, always swallowing my feelings to spare someone else discomfort. Maybe the slap wasn't the whole story. The bigger issue is everything I absorbed afterward, everything I never said, everything I excused. Next week, my lawyer will serve her papers. I don't feel happy or victorious. I just feel like I'm finally listening to the part of myself that never got space in this marriage. My dad is furious that my mom slept with other people in an open marriage he wanted. My parents got married when they were very young. My dad and mom were rushed into it after she got pregnant. My grandfather helped my dad set up a business in a big city, and we moved there shortly after I was born. My mom grew up in a conservative southern town where she was taught to be a submissive wife. Even after moving to the city, she didn't socialize much. She had no friends and rarely went out. My dad was often away on business, providing for us but not really being there as a husband or father. As I grew up, I became my mom's confidant. I encouraged her to make friends and find hobbies. After a lot of pushing, she started visiting a nearby park and eventually made her first friend, a gym trainer. With their support, she joined the gym and began to build a social life, but she still confided in me about everything. About a year ago, my dad asked my mom for an open marriage. He claimed he was unhappy and that she wasn't giving him everything he wanted. My mom, who held strong Christian values, was devastated and shared her tears with me. I suggested she consider divorce, but she didn't believe in it and refused to be the one to end their marriage. As my dad pushed for this arrangement, I knew it wouldn't end well if my mom agreed. With encouragement from her friend and me, she reluctantly agreed, but only if they promised to be completely open with each other. My dad, now in his early 40s, was a middle-aged man with a bit of a belly, while my mom, at 39, was athletic and fit. I helped her create online dating profiles, and after several months of chatting, she began to hook up with a few people. This newfound attention boosted her confidence, and she seemed happier. Meanwhile, my dad quickly connected with his secretary, but struggled to find other partners. They maintained their agreement of transparency, and my mom shared her experiences with him. A few weeks ago, my dad lashed out at my mom over a minor issue. Normally, she would have apologized, but with her newfound confidence, she stood her ground. Since then, their arguments have escalated. My dad makes snide remarks about her appearance, and though he nearly called her something terrible, he stopped himself. I think the reality of their open marriage is finally hitting him. My mom told me he tried to discuss ending the arrangement, but she firmly rejected the idea. I have a feeling they might split up. It's strange to think about, considering my dad was never really there for either of us. I don't feel sorry for him, but I wish he had put more effort into our family. On the other hand, I'm genuinely happy for my mom. A few days after my last post, my dad left home and served my mom with divorce papers. He told my grandparents about the situation, implying that my mom had been unfaithful. They came over and began berating her. I had kept screenshots of all their communications, and when my mom showed them, it only made things worse. Soon after, my mom's old church friends showed up. Back when she attended church, they looked down on her for being from a small town. After meeting her gym friends, she stopped going to church altogether. These friends called her hurtful names, and she eventually kicked them out. My mom, who is currently focused on her fitness, has defined abs and arms, which led to even more cruel comments, including accusations of having a man body. Thankfully, her trainer friend has been a great support. She connected my mom with a divorce attorney and has been there for her during this tough time. It turns out the business my dad has been running is actually owned by my mom. It was set up by her father in her name, so it belongs to her. I had no idea until now, thinking my dad owned it. The whole situation is a mess. My dad is staying in a hotel, and my grandparents left after a week of trying to force my parents back together. I know there's more drama to come with the divorce, but for now, I hope things calm down. TFU by being a good neighbor and ruining Halloween. It was Halloween, and I was driving home after picking up my kid from school. Our neighborhood was filled with amazing decorations, so we decided to take a little detour to enjoy the festive spirit. As we drove, I noticed a trash can that had blown into the road. I pulled over, and my little backseat driver and I agreed that moving it back to the curb would be the right thing to do. I hopped out of the car and approached the can. The lid was open and lying on the street, so I stepped on it to lift the can back up. But as I did, I slipped and fell face first into the edge of the can. I quickly stood up, grumbling to myself, and put the can back where it belonged. But then I felt something warm on my glasses. I touched my head and realized I had cut myself right at my hairline. Blood was everywhere. I got back in the car and said, "Well, that was silly." My kid agreed and asked if we needed to go to the doctor. I buried my face in a spare hoodie to stop the bleeding and told him no. I called my husband to explain what happened, and he jokingly told me to stop saving the world. We continued to admire the decorations, though I was mostly focused on my bleeding head. When we got home, we headed to the bathroom to clean up. After seeing how bad the cut was, I decided I needed to go to urgent care. The pain was intense, and I found myself crying as I drove, struggling to keep one eye open. Thankfully, it wasn't a long drive. When I arrived, I was the only patient, which was a relief. The receptionist was kind, and soon a nurse practitioner came over. She cleaned me up and wrapped my head in gauze, but said I'd need to go to the ER. While waiting for the ambulance, I learned I would need staples, and the paramedic mentioned they might have to shave my head. I wasn't thrilled about that. At the ER, they checked me over, and since I was coherent, they sent me to the waiting room. I was covered in blood and pumpkin guts, fitting for Halloween. After a couple of hours, I was called back for treatment. They gave me some pain medication and a new bandage. The only relief I felt was when I pressed down on the gauze, so I was grateful for the meds. I waited longer for a room to open up, and after some more checks and the CT scan, they decided to give me 2 staples instead of shaving my head. Let me tell you, it hurt. Once the doctor left, I grabbed some leftover numbing cream and applied it to my gauze, which helped a bit. They found a potential bleed on the CT scan, so I was told I might need to stay longer for monitoring. Fortunately, the head trauma team decided I could go home after being observed. They gave me instructions for pain management and advised me to avoid screens and heavy lifting. Now, about 20 hours later, I'm at home. My kids are calling me a zombie because of the staples. But apparently, I'm not allowed to eat their brains. My husband did a fantastic job making sure their Halloween was still fun, and we have the whole weekend to carve pumpkins. Still, I can't shake the feeling of guilt for ruining our Halloween. So, there you have it. I tried to do a good deed, ended up cutting my head open, and spent Halloween in the ER. I'm not supposed to be on my phone right now, but I hope you can find some humor in my misadventure. I know I will once the staples stop hurting.